Welcome to Taking the Rams by the Horns, a podcast that takes current affairs out of current affairs. This is an award-winning podcast in partnership with Sowetan Live. I'm your host, Rams Mabote. And by the way, thanks for always tuning in. Thanks for you guys who've subscribed. Tell some more, right? This content is unique. Nobody does this like the way I do it, man. Get them to subscribe. So I'm going to confess, I'm an Afro-pessimist, right? I've seen a lot of wrong things in the continent that have made me feel like, this continent will never come right. I even tell people that you have to really pay me very lots of money for me to travel the continent. I feel that things are not working. But then there is this fellow, man. One of the top, by the way, in my book, one of the top marketers in the world, not in South Africa only, in the world. And man, he has made Africa fashionable in the last few years, even produced a book about it, although it is linked to his own story. And I thought, Thebe Ikalafeng must come here and account and tell me, what am I not seeing that he sees in this continent? He's here and he's my guest. Dumela guys.
Dumelang Raro.
Usiami.
Ke siame
You don't age, man.
No.
I've known you for like 30 years or so. You still look the same. It's only the gray, but you.
So the gray, right? But we spoke earlier that but what do they say? They say black don't crack. I think they say so.
Yeah.
But also I think if you are active,
Yes.
you never age, because I think what ages most of us is a lack of
We're
activity.
dormant,
When I
we're
say
doing
activity,
nothing.
I'm not saying being in the gym.
Yes.
I'm just saying that actively thinking, actively applying,
Yeah.
actively contributing. Once you're doing that, once you see yourself as part of a living organism, then you cannot die. Aging is almost like dying slowly.
So before I get to my trouble with my Afro pessimism,
Pessimism.
I just want to know though, where did this all start? When did elites come to you and say, let me travel this continent, get to know it? And I don't even think when you started it, you knew it was going to culminate in a book. But how did this all start?
I definitely wasn't going to culminate in the book.
Yeah.
The book was forced matter. I write the book. I said, okay, I'll write it.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at, I look at my career in phases,
Yeah.
if you will. There was the first phase of the quote unquote first black phase.
Yeah.
And in the first black phase, for lack of a better word, when we came back to South Africa, some of us were in academic exile, others were in political exile. And when we came back and we were put in positions,
Yes.
which many of us were not qualified for. But we thought we knew what we're doing,
Yeah.
and we faked it until we made it. I think, and some of us messed it up.
No names mentioned.
No names mentioned. But I think in that first phase of my career, I saw myself, and in retrospect now, and I didn't know that's what it was. But in many ways, I was sort of a example or a benchmark or or sort of carrying the flag, if you will, for those for how good we can be or how amazing we can be as Africans when we're given the opportunities. And I think that there's a lot of people like that, whether it's the Sim Shabalalas or whether who are the CEO of Standard Banks today, whether it's there's a whole lot. I don't have to even name one name because there's tons
There's
of
lots
us.
of guys.
There's lots of people in that first era. So I was part of that first era.
Yeah.
And in my career, that first era, anyway, the lens that I used was a global lens. Because I started my job at Colgate in New York, and in that space, there was a way on how you show up.
Yeah.
How you show up as how success shows up, both in how you dress, how you speak, and how you deliver.
Yes.
So that is my first era, and in that era, you could see I was very global, if you will.
Yeah.
I was very global in my beautiful custom suits and ties and shirts. Doesn't matter whether I was working for a Nike or whether I was working for a Colgate in a factory. I wear a suit.
Yes.
Not
sneakers.
Not sneakers, no.
Not track suits. When you mean suit, you mean dress suits.
Not track suits.
Not track suits, yes.
When they zigged, I was zagging. And because, my mentor, Philip Berry, told me when I started in New York then, more than 30 years ago, he says to me, Thebe, when you come here, the first day you arrive, you're going to be one of the very first people, one of the very few blacks. Want to make sure they don't judge you on how you look. So they must engage.
Because that's the first judgment, right? It's how we look.
And then now remember, I had two things against me, at least on paper.
Yeah.
I'm African.
Yeah.
And I'm black. So I would have had two negatives. He says, let's get rid of those negatives. you can't do much about being black, but you can do something about how you show up.
Yes.
And that was, and when I came back, I showed up like that for a long time. In South Africa. Now, when I left South Africa, so I'm in corporate. When I left corporate, I entered into my second phase. Now, in my second phase, I now had to be the quote-unquote entrepreneur. In the entrepreneurial phase, I then started questioning how I showed up. Because I started to worry that how I show up is seen as more visual. People will always say to me, "Oh, you dress so well." And then I started worrying, nobody
said, "I like that thought."
Nobody says,
"I like what you
that
did."
is groundbreaking thinking.
That is a brand,
Rather they're talking about no. And then I began. Matter of fact, I think I began immediately after leaving corporate. I began to get rid of the suits, be more casual, focus more on the thought leadership.
Yes.
Because I was now entering a second part. Because now the first black era was about corporate, how we show up in corporate. Now in the second era was how we think. What legacy are we leaving from a thinking perspective? Is how we're contributing to thought leadership. So that's when I focused my energy and says, but where can we lead? And when I went into the branding space, there were no black people again in that space. Not that branding should be seen through a black lens. It should be seen through a global lens, period, at that stage. So I then went into a more thought leadership space, branding companies, all those. So now I'm in the second phase, which is a little bit closer to the second, closer to the first.
Yeah.
But now in that space, now started traveling a little bit more in the continent, right? Now started, because now I can't just be focused on branding South African companies or global companies in South Africa.
Yeah.
Now started seeing the rest of the continent. And I remember I went to a meeting in Ghana 2008, 2007 or 2008, and they said to me, "You must wear a suit. And you must bring a white person, because who we respect here, how we respect people."
The country that got the first liberation in this continent. No.
So I then arrived. Then I got myself a white person who was very smart. So like everybody else gets in Indian during the I got myself a white person to take along with. So I went to Ghana and I arrived. I'm wearing a beautiful Daniel suit. Custom-made shirts. I'm hot as hell.
As hell.
Because Ghana is not South Africa.
Yeah.
And I'm drenched. And everybody around me is beautifully dressed in African clothes.
Yeah, the kente cloth.
The kente cloth, the beautiful dashikis and all those. I'm looking around, I'm like, I'm out of place here. And then, of course, subsequent to that, I never dressed like that.
Yes.
Subsequent to that, I never took a suit to anybody, and I never felt the need to bring a white person anymore. I just felt I'm going to bring me to play now. I said, I've seen, going to Nigeria, going to Uganda, I started seeing a different side of Africa, a different side of how we look, how authentically we can appear. Of course, we don't have to wear lawn cloths and all those anymore. But how we've adapted the Western way to our way, if you will, and sometimes how we go truly traditional. So now that was a phase I'm in, now the second phase, which is a mixture of thought leadership and a little bit of identity, if you will. But then I entered the third phase. Now, African Union was turning 50 years in 2013. And a friend of mine in London who owns African Business and New African Magazine and African Banker, Omar, then said, "Can you write a perspective on African brands?" Then I said, yes. Actually, before that, the World Cup came to South Africa, 2010. Yeah. When the World Cup came to South Africa, now I remember who were the only African brands? MTN.
Yes.
Was the only global sponsor. Then others like F&B, there were suppliers, because they were supplying the stadium and plus was supplying the trains and the buses. But MTN. So then thoughts started working in my head. It's like, but so we don't have any brands. These people, 300,000 people are going to come to South Africa, to Africa, and we're going to feed them what they're used to.
What they see every day.
What they see every day. So now that thought started playing in my head. And then I was asked by some guy who wrote the book, I forget his name now, as we wrote the book, Africa, the Good News. And he said, can you write a perspective on how you would reimagine Africa? I was now forced to start thinking. Now, this is still 2008, 9, 10, around there. I was now forced to think about, how would I imagine South Africa rather? Because now when I think about Africa, I'm thinking about blood diamonds, when I'm thinking about Africa, I'm thinking about corruption,
dictatorships.
I'm thinking that's sort of the global narrative we have. And then I started needing to find the corollary to that, the opposite of what we could be, of whether do we look at blood diamonds or do we look at what diamonds can do for the us shining in the world and can do for the continent. So I started having those thoughts, which now I wrote the article first time there in 2009 or somewhere. Then 2010, I then said, let me establish Brand Africa. Now, Brand Africa was a forum which at that time I thought I will create a platform for us to talk about what I'm seeing. That we're not seeing African brands. That people are saying that the World Cup in South did it after World Cup. The World Cup in South Africa was such a success. What can we learn from that we can use to take us forward as a winning continent, definitely winning nation and a winning continent? And looking at that, so now you can see now I'm beginning to transform. Now my focus is no longer trying to win the business for Coke, win the business for McDonald's, win the business for all those. My question has started to saying, why are we not part of the game? Why are we not playing? Why are we not in the ring as African brands? So Brand Africa now shifted from just looking at conversations, because I learned something about us. If you give us a mic, we just want to talk.
I hope we finish this one though.
Well, what is that? We just want to talk,
yeah,
but we don't implement. So, and we don't measure.
Yeah.
So that's when I introduced Brand Africa. Then the following year, I introduced Brand Africa 100 Africa's Best Brands as a barometer or metric of how far we've come along, creating brands that are made in Africa and shifting the focus of Brand Africa to a brand-led African Renaissance. And so now I'm becoming much clearer in that space. About what we are. So I'm now in my third phase, right? Because it's probably third phase,
yeah,
2.5 phase. At that space now, my mind is clearly on African brands. My mind is clearly on what we as Africans need to do to drive African brands. But now I'm talking about African brands, and I don't really know the continent. I've only been to 10, 15 countries at that stage.
Of the 54?
Of the 54 at that stage. Then my friend, which is the point I was going to make earlier, my friend Omar says, for the 2013 50th anniversary of the African Union,
yeah,
can you write a reflection on where African brands are right now, 50 years of the African Union? I was like, sure. Excited, I go have coffee with the CEO of Samsung, KK Park. He was responsible for Africa, Middle East, Korean guy. I met him and I said to him, what makes you so successful in the continent? He says, because at that stage, if you don't have we used to have BlackBerry.
Yeah.
They actually used to have Nokia.
Nokia.
Everybody had a Nokia.
Yes.
Right. And then we all moved to BlackBerry.
Yeah.
And now Samsung.
BBM, we used to write BBM.
BBM was the life.
Yeah.
Then before WhatsApps and all those, then Samsung came in and wiped them all out and set up office across the continent.
Yes.
They were present in every African country. I said, how did you do that? He says, quite simple. We know the continent. So what do you mean you know the continent? He says, you're talking to me, KK Park, a Korean. I've been to every country in Africa except for Swaziland.
What had Swaziland done to him? Or was he avoiding maidens and stuff like that? It can get very tricky when you get there.
Very tricky. But poor Swaziland is always in trouble because of its relationship with Taiwan.
Yes.
In a China-focused continent. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons I think he didn't go there. And I said, you've been to every country? He says, yes. I said, that's quite interesting. So, but how did you, so just being there, you can come up with great ideas. He says, no. When I'm in the countries, I don't go to these 5-star hotels you guys love. I go to where the people are. Sometimes I sleep at their homes. Sometimes I eat with them. Sometimes I eat their markets. And he says, that inspired our Made in Africa ideas. He says, you guys look at the lights going down and you say that's corruption, that's backwardness. We look at the sun going up that same day. We're like, but there's another opportunity we are not leveraging. He says that's how they build their solar products. Then I was like, whoa. So then I left the place. I wrote the article. I left the place. But first thing I did, I called Omar, my friend in London. He's Tunisian. I said, I met somebody who knows Africa better than you and I.
And they're not African.
And they're not African.
Yeah.
You are a publisher of African Business, African Banker, New African Magazine. How many countries have you gone to? It's like 23. I'm like, Oma, we are not African.
Wow.
I said, we are not African. We need to do something. And then I began to intentionally ask myself the questions about how can I speak about a brand Africa when I don't know Africa? To create the whole brand of an idea, you must know the idea, even whether it is just touching a base or just a little bit.
Yeah.
But know
But
the
be
concept.
there.
Be there.
Yeah.
Be there. And then I went to Kilimanjaro. And yesterday I was at a birthday, somebody's 50th birthday. We'd gone to Kilimanjaro with us, and we all spoke about it. Then I went to Kilimanjaro for Mandela's birthday, 2015.
Yeah.
And already my mind was now. Remember, I'm already.
Was that part of the Trek Mandela thing?
Trek for Mandela.
Trek for Mandela, yeah.
With the
Nelson
Nelson
Mandela
Mandela
Foundation, yeah.
And I remember my mind is already now ticking. I started Brand Africa 2010. I wrote the article 2013. I met KK Park 2013. I'm now on top of Kilimanjaro. And I think it happened to a lot of us. There was a shift. Because when I left there, I was more intent on knowing the rest of the continent. I came back and I said, if you want to rise anywhere, you must first rise at home. If you want to be respected anywhere, you must first be respected at home.
Yeah.
There was a metaphor, a symbolism of being at the top of Kilimanjaro before being at the top of Everest.
Ah, yes. I can see that.
And then I came down, and then I became very intentional. I started saying, I have to see the rest of the continent by hook or by crook. Actually, more by hook and hook. and that's how I then started moving into the... And then I had something playing in my back of my mind. I then said, and I want to do it the way KK Park advised me. I must not go there and lie on the beach and talk about the soft life.
Yes.
And holding crystal glasses and talk about moe and all those things. I must do it authentically. I must be with the people. I must eat what they eat. I must go with what they call home is home.
Yeah.
And I must dress like they do. And it became transformational, and it just changed how I look at life and how I look at the continent. And I began to not resent, but I began to be less interested in how the West and the rest, just focus on Africa. I stopped worrying about the Eiffel Tower, about the Tower of Pizza, about the Statue of Liberty, because I also learned another important thing as I travel, that in everywhere else in the world, you go to see things.
Yeah.
Everywhere else in the rest of the continent, you see people. And I started to see people. And when we started, you said something, not to me, but in your intro, you said something in terms of your Afro-pessimism, and you asked the question about what I see in that.
Mm-hmm.
I saw us.
You've packed a lot of things in your response. Bloody good response, by the way. You are what we call in journalism an interviewer's dream. I ask you one question and you can speak forever. We love that. I don't ask and give me one word, then it becomes a problem. The end goal, I can understand that you wanted to know, but how that knowledge? What would you do for Thebe? What do you do for Brand Africa? What is the end game?
Got it. So now, as you get older,
yeah,
you ask yourself questions. And L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, said, at the end of our lives, we're going to be asked two questions. So the first question will be asked is, did you do the things you're supposed to do? In other words, did you do what Leo Buscaglia said? Leo Buscaglia said, our talent is a gift from God. What you do with it is a gift back to God. So did you do the things you were meant to do on earth? He says the second question will be asked is, did the people who knew you think your life was worth living? So as you get older, you can ask yourself the question, but what have I done with my time on earth? Because I'm trying to answer a question of the end goal of all this. The end goal of all this, I ask myself, as an African, how will Africa measure my existence, my raison d'être, the reason for my existence?
Yes.
How will Africa say this man's life was worth living? And then started myself, I said, but I need to use two things. I need to use my passions, my product, what I can do, and merge them to a purpose. So I use my passion and my product branding, and then says that can lead me to a purpose. I can play a role here. Some people are going to play a role in this continent through what you do with broadcasting, which is shaping narratives. Some people with financial services, creating access to financial services. Others creating businesses and all those. I said, but I can lead it from a branding. And branding in multiple spaces. Because what brand is? A brand is a promise made and a promise delivered.
Yep.
A brand is really how we see things. I said I could use this to help change how we see ourselves and how we want to be seen in the world. And I said, but from a branding perspective, I can drive the idea of made in Africa brands. Because made in Africa brands will do a couple of things for us. One is they will enable us to create industries. The industries will have to solve the problem that we're facing of unemployment. They'll create jobs. The jobs will create a second problem that we're facing. It will help to alleviate the debt by keeping the money here. Yeah. And when we keep the money, we're able to solve a third problem, which is we will fund our own development agenda instead of being aid-led. So the end goal for me is to drive this brand-led agenda. Because this brand-led agenda will contribute towards the greater challenge of the continent of how to truly become independent. Because now, if you remember, on 25 May 1963, when Kwame Nkrumah and the 32 presidents got together in Addis Ababa, they spoke about two things. Kwame particularly spoke about political independence without economic independence is useless.
Yeah.
What the 57 Ghana, 50 Egypt, and a whole lot of them, and including two South Africa, 94, all they've accomplished was political independence or emancipation. But we needed now to truly become independent. We needed to re-own our economies. Yeah. So from my end, from a branding perspective, by driving, by encouraging, by catalyzing, by inspiring young people, whether it's a Makosa, whether it's a Tsepo, whether it's Drip, whether it is Galaxy Boy, by driving and celebrating and encouraging them to continue to build great brands, I'm contributing to that brand-led agenda.
So when I first saw you do this, I looked at your pictures and I looked at the food you eat and I looked at... So I then became even more pessimistic. Then I said, is Thebe doing some spin for the continent so that we forget the other nonsense?
I love that.
And then the second question was, and you're going to answer them here to save me from myself, was, who of these dictators is behind this man, giving him money so that he paints their countries to look good to us? So I want you to take me out of my misery.
Take out of your misery. The first misery is, am I trying to spin for countries?
Yes.
I did something else that's important, is I had choices. We all have choices in life. So in the last 15 years, I've spent maybe $1 million. We worked it out actually. It's about $1 million. That $1 million that I spent out of what I generated, I could have used that money to buy myself a farm, to buy myself some car, some lifestyle, and live that life. But when I die, I'm going to leave that. It's going to expire and someone's going to fight over it.
Yeah.
But I chose to use that to plant a seed. And so all those travels you've seen have never been funded, not being funded by anybody else but myself.
But yourself.
I funded them because you need to put energy and skin to the game that you are fighting for. So a whole lot of us, we speak well, but we don't fund our ideas well. So I thought I must invest in the idea that I'm driving. And that's what I did. So there is nobody, I'm not doing any spin for any country.
Okay,
because
I'm answered.
As you look at Brand Africa 100, for example, the study that I do every year for the last 15 years, the study is now done in 31 countries. And I go to about a third of those countries to celebrate excellence in homegrown imagination and global excellence. And I go celebrate the brands which are driving this narrative, which are representing what it is that I'm trying to do, which is to encourage to encourage made in Africa brands to be as competitive as the global brands. Because if we do well, the global brands will have a competition. The problem is that they're having a free reign in the continent because we have relegated ourselves to the benches.
And is it? Are you monetizing? Are you getting your some of your $1 million back in doing this work?
I'll get it when I'm dead. I'll get it when I see. I'll get that $1 million and whatever else I spend and the time and the energy. I'll get it back when I see on the stock exchange the brands that are listed, as we've seen in this year's study in South Africa as an example. The study that we've seen in South Africa as an example, we saw Maxhosa, we saw Batu, we saw Galaxy Boy, we saw Tsepo Jeans among the top brands in the continent, in the country. That's how we get our money back. When somebody else, through our actions, is contributing to a better vision and view of who we are as a people, an example of what we are fighting for, that economic independence that we're talking about. So I don't measure it in terms of, am I making money? Am I going to make more money? Because you see, money is just paper. Money is just money. The question is, what does the money do for you? What does the money enable you to do? So I've chosen not to lead a lavish, if you will, commercially driven life, rather to ask myself the question, when I'm gone, sometime sooner or later, how will my time on earth have mattered?
Okay, enough with the spin now.
I know.
Let's get to why I called you here. What is wrong with this continent? You know, the other day I'm on social media. There is this geriatric 80-something-year-old Ugandan former Minister of Finance or something to that effect. He's canvassing to be voted to come back into Parliament, maybe also as a minister, because I think in a lot of African countries you have first to be elected as an MP, which we don't do here. We elect parties. I mean, why do we still have all these guys? Some of them don't even live in this continent, but they're presidents of their countries. I mean, like, what is wrong? What is wrong?
What is wrong with this continent is us. So it's not the leaders, because we are the ones who, whether we believe it or not, put them there. Yes, there are many instances across the continent where the results don't necessarily reflect our wishes and our actions. We know that. But the question is, and then what? So now what are you seeing in countries like Kenya? You see in countries like Kenya, the Gen Zs are saying, this currency called the vote that I've given you, you better deliver on it. Otherwise, I'm going to make you very uncomfortable. And in a way, it's forcing the leaders to become a bit more accountable than they would have been.
Yeah.
Leaders will still, political leaders, not just African leaders, anywhere, whether it's in the West, in the Asia, or whether it's in Africa, will always disappoint you. They will always steal. They will always lie, because most of them, what they care about mostly is the position. They don't care much about what to do when in that position. They just want to be in there so that they can eat. So what is wrong with this continent? We are the wrong part. We the electorate. We the citizen, because we don't hold them accountable. We don't hold them out. So what did you learn in 2011 or so in the Arab Spring? That young people can actually change the world. You are learning it everywhere now. You're beginning to see the young people are a bit more uncomfortable, because 70% of this continent under the age of 30.
Yeah.
So these decisions or bad decisions that are being made are going to affect their future.
And the majority of people in the continent.
The majority of the continent. So what are they doing? They're saying, well, I can't live in a country where 50% of us are unemployed. I can't live in a country where I am on the government dole, or I have to pretend to be dependent, to be crippled, to be disabled, so that I can get the government dole because I can't get a job.
Yes.
So, but we can't keep going that way. We have to now say, how do I take the bull by the horns? How do I take back my power? Because that X is supposed to have been something powerful, but we have just abdicated it. We vote and really don't care about the outcome of the vote. We then say things like, "Retlaring."
Yes.
We say things, "Retlaring, I can give one by chewing muso." So instead of saying, but wait, that's not that what the outcomes are not a reflection of my vote. I demand accountability. And when who have got it correctly, because some of them do get it correctly, I think South Africa in the main elections reflected the will of the people.
Yeah.
And having reflected the will of the people, the question is, do we continue to not just say, yes, I showed you, but we then also say, I now want you to report back to me. How are you doing? Remember what these people are. They're supposed to be public servants, but we've turned them into gods. And when they go on the highway, we move aside.
So you've mentioned Kenya. And
as an example.
And we saw a lot, even when the two incumbents in the elections were not agreeing. It was the young people who said, get things done, right? They were fighting for. What other shining examples are there, where I probably can dust off my passport and take a chance, and not add an extra page of $10 in the passport, for me to go through.
I've been to Ethiopia a lot of times, and it is the home of the African Union.
Yes.
And for a long time, Ethiopia was not a reflection of the African capital, if you will. I want you to go back there now. And I think Premier Abiy has got a philosophy called Medema or something like that, which is a philosophy of engagement with the people. Yeah. And what is so interesting now is Ethiopia, city center of Ethiopia, 5 years ago maybe, used to look like the city center of Joburg today.
The one that not far from now.
The one that, the way around
across the road from here.
The one that we look back and say, but when I was a young kid, this was my aspiration.
Yes. I used to dress up, man, to go to Johannesburg
when
CBD.
We call it Gauteng,
yes.
Maboneng.
Yes.
That's what we talked about. So that's how Ethiopia was maybe 5 years ago. I want you to go back there now. If you go back there now, you are going to see what Premier Abiy has done. And I'm not advocating for Abiy. You'll see what he's done. He cleaned up the city. He wiped down all derelict buildings, put up the tallest building in Africa, put up parks. We grew up with parks.
Yes.
Put up parks, put up $1 billion museum to Adwa. Adwa was when the Ethiopians defeated the Italians to withstand being taken over or being colonized. Put up a $1 billion massive structure, which is a long-term structure, not the stuff that we see sometimes that's going to fall apart when the next government changes. So he's put up those things. He's put up a science park. He's put up amphitheaters. So when I go into Ethiopia now, I'm like...
So Addis is different now.
Addis is everything.
I mean, I love the fact,
other than the fact that they are different from all of us.
Own
language,
during the World Cup,
own food, own clothing,
Africa Cup of Nations,
own religion.
Their fans were very attractive in the Africa Cup of Nations.
I see where you headed.
So, I mean, one of the things I love, again, about Addis, or at least about Ethiopia, is that they now have the most successful airline in the continent.
Trust me, what I learned about that airline, and I've spent time with the executives of Ethiopian Airline.
Yeah.
So I went there 2 years ago, and they showed me the airline. That airline, they've got, 150, a fleet of 150.
Really?
Which is, I need to work it out. It could be as many as all the African airlines put together. Because remember, South Africa now only has 10.
Yeah.
From a high of 80 or something like that a few years ago. So if you add up the 10 of South Africa, you add up the 0 of Zimbabwe, the 0 of Namibia, the 0 of all the other countries, and then you get Egypt, and then Kenya, and then 1 or 2 in Botswana. I swear to goodness, all of them collectively must be equal to Ethiopian. But what I love about what I learned from Ethiopia, that's what they told me, that's what I sort of see, so I can only go as far as what I see, is while it is a state-owned entity, the government put in place people who are qualified and then stepped aside and measured the results and told them, don't F up. Because there, you mess up, you out.
Yeah.
It's the same philosophy.
There's consequence.
There's
we don't have consequence.
Oh, what is consequence? It's the same thing as in Rwanda, your other country. And people say to me, oh, Rwanda. However way you look at Rwanda, it works.
But now that you've introduced Rwanda, some other pessimist says, well, actually, it's only Kigali that's doing well in Rwanda. The rest of the country is not doing that well. So they're saying, it's a marketing exercise for Kagame to make.
You have to start somewhere. Some people say that it's only Addis Ababa, which does well in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Some people for a long time used to say it's only Johannesburg and Cape Town that worked. You need a catalyst. You need a pilot. You need something that people can aspire to. So when I look at the Ethiopian example or even the Rwanda example, I said, here is a vision of what we can be. Somewhere must be a place that represent just how great we can be, and we can build on that. What does Rwanda do? 2018, that's where all the consequential decisions were made about the Africa passport, about the Africa Free Trade Continental Area. Rwanda has now positioned itself as the place of consequential African decisions, but also as the technology center of Africa. So now all IT tech-related decisions.
That's our Silicon Valley now.
They've created an innovation park. An innovation park. Put a university in the center of it, which focuses just on the science and innovation. So, are you with me? So yes, we the problem with us is we're big critics, but we are very small when it comes to delivery. Like, what have you done before you go comment about other people's countries?
So, when we should have spoken a few weeks ago. Then I was told you're going to Lesotho, and then I also heard you on the radio talk about it, and you keep on going. So, do you go cold? I mean, when you go to a country you haven't been to, when you go for the first time, do you go cold, or do you speak to our embassy there to say, I'm coming, roll up the red carpet for me so that I know who to talk to, or you even speak to that country's ambassador here and say, connect me to the right people so that when I land there, I'm not lost?
I've only ever spoken to one ambassador from here to another country.
Yeah.
And that's ambassador from Eritrea.
Okay.
And
you love the horn, right?
So Ambassador Ali says to me, Thebe, what are you going to do in Eritrea? I want you to come and explain to me. It's a different country. It's not as open as it hasn't been traditionally as open, but it's opening up now.
Yeah.
And it's, what are you going to do? I said, Ambassador, I'm now on country 40-something. I need to see this country as part of my agenda to see the continent. So it's only our country I've been to. In the other side, I've been to a couple of South African embassies. And one of them wanted to kick me out because I said I didn't have an appointment. And I said to them, since when do you make an appointment to go to your mother's house? And I said that to them. You can probably ask them. I said, since when do you make an appointment to go to your house? I said, you exist because of the taxpayer of South Africans. You should not have office hours for South Africans. I couldn't care less who you are. Yes, you can. I said, you couldn't get out like that. And that was in Equatorial Guinea or somewhere. I told him, you're not going to tell me that about visiting my home. And then, of course, in one other country where I was in a compromised position, where my life was at stake.
I was going to get there, but continue.
When my life was at stake, I then called the ambassador, or the embassy ambassador. It was about 11 midnight or something. I said, Ambassador, I'm in trouble. I'm encircled. Hey, bayahlupa labantu, just keep us posted. So the president of
do an Instagram, post about it.
The president of the country is the one who intervened, who sent the soldiers and the security to guard my room, and sent the securities to see my passage out of the country. So you remember what I do is I've got multiple heads within branding.
Yeah.
I help countries to shape their narratives. I help leaders to position themselves for leadership, whether they're politicians, whether they're executives, and I help brands to build great brands. So it will be one of those.
Yeah, you see now, you've come to, Thebe. So when now you go and meet these guys who are doing bad, there people don't like them, and you take business from them to make them look good. That's why your room gets surrounded.
Not quite actually. Not quite, because I'm very, what's the word? I have tried, as human as I am, as humanly possible as I can be, I've tried to work with people whose brands or reputations I can live with. And many of them, and what we know about politicians is they start as Thebe and Rams, with nothing, with grand purposes. The problem becomes when they get into the position, then they take another form. Then they look around and says, my friends have been around forever. Where am I going? They're like, this is the fifth home. It's my country. I own this, sorry. So that's the problem. So I try to work with people with a great vision for the countries. I try to work with people who, but it doesn't always work out that way sometimes. And it's not always seen that way by the other people on the other side.
Yeah, because those who oppose them, right? And
those who
oppose them could be the wrong guys.
Could be the wrong guys. So now Rams is sitting that side. Rams sees me this side with somebody else. And then Rams tries to make my life difficult because he says, but I can see you are with X. So it's the lay of the land. It's how it happens everywhere. As even here it happens the same way. It happens here in South Africa the same way. In South Africa, when you're on Cyril Ramaphosa's side, it means you are anti the Paul Mashatile. Or you are anti Zuma. If you are on, so nobody ever says if you are supporting Floyd, you are not anti MK. Or if you're supporting EFF, you're not anti Floyd. Nobody ever says you're a professional delivering a skill and delivering a service. They always look at you as when. So
who do you sleep with?
Yeah.
a joke goes that in the Western world, when you go for a job interview, the panel sitting on the other side will ask you about your skills. You know, when it's in Africa, they ask who sent you.
You know what's so interesting is I'm working on my follow-up book. I'm working on my follow-up book, a follow-up book to my book, The Traveler, which The Traveler, as you know, was a memoir. So it was me looking at my mirror, at a mirror, and reflecting on the journey. My next book.
And you caused commotion in the Rosebank Center. I mean, that launch looked like an auction, man. It was full. Man.
They said it was the biggest.
It was the biggest.
This was the biggest launch in 30 years.
Yeah.
I don't know where. Anyway, it was interesting, and it was very interesting because I knew everybody.
You know a lot of people.
I'm from Kimberley, so I should know. We shine, so we attract a lot of attention. So my new book, which I'm working hard on, I'm close to the end actually, Rooted and Rising. It is focusing on how we can reclaim our identity and to stand out proudly African in this very crowded world that we're in. In that book, the one fundamental thing, when you make the comment about who sent you, the one fundamental thing I'm driving, is the difference between us Africans as the rest of the world. Because here, how we measure your success is not by where you are headed. We measure success by where you come from. That's why when you say, ke Ramabote, but Ramabote, then they want to know a bit more.
Yes.
Because now what they're trying to do is they now want to push you into the context of where you come from, how you were raised, where you with me, your family, that's how we are. So in the book, I'm working that way now. So I understand when somebody says who sent you. Because who sent you tries to explain the people where you come from. Who sent you here? Do they share the same vision as we do? Because that's how we measure success in Africa.
I'm hoping. No, let me ask a question. do you immerse yourself in the politics when you go out there into those countries, or your focus is still about branding and rebranding and focusing on the things that can work in those countries?
My focus is on my strengths, and my strength is in helping people to create the right narrative for their stories. And whether that story is for a product, or it's for an individual, or it's for a country, that's always been my focus. What I try to never do is I tried never to be a citizen of that country.
Mm-hmm.
I don't put myself necessarily in the shoes of the citizen, in that I do not, what's right? I don't want to say I don't take sides, because I guess by helping Rams to shape his narrative, you're taking sides.
Yeah.
But I don't really become part of the political class, if you will, because it doesn't matter the fact that I've been to Ghana over 100 times, Ethiopia perhaps 50 plus, Kenya perhaps over 50 as well, and Botswana, and all those countries I've done multiple times, all of them minimum of 10.
Yes.
It doesn't matter that I've been there. I will never be from those countries. I will always be, first and foremost, a South African with a perspective about the rest of the continent and the world, and who has at least been in the countries to get a little insight as to how they think, but I could never quite be one of them. But it does give me an advantage when I engage with them, because I know a little bit about who they are and how they think, but I never get myself so immersed in their lives, in their businesses, in their politics, that I begin to lose my location.
So you shared the story of being surrounded at night and you could have been killed or kidnapped. That's the ugly. Please share with me, even if it's just one funny moment in one of your travels, and something happened, you thought, what? I can't even imagine. I mean, but I'm sure there are funny stories.
There's lots of interesting stories. Somebody said to me on the weekend, says, why don't you write about your immigration stories? He says, you must have, Africa is beautiful. The rest of the continent is beautiful when it comes to the stories about immigration. Yeah. I said, you're right. I said, you're right. When I arrived in Comoros, I was with a friend from Rwanda. When you get to there, then they stamp my passport. Then I'm in Comoros. So I'm waiting on the other side. But my friend has not been let in. 10 minutes, 30, 50, 1 hour. So I asked, what are you guys talking? They said the head of immigration. I said, what are you talking to him about? He says, I said, because we're together, because you've let me in. Oh, you're together? Bring your passport, take out the visa. So they take out the visa. And then they said, immigration is now closed. So now you're going to have to go to the head of immigration, which is in the middle of town. So we go into this one track street in town. We arrive there. They open the doors. After this immigration, it's the interrogation center. So this young guy, muscular, dressed, how
Who sent you?
Who sent you?
Who sent you?
And they said, what are you doing here? I'm like, Comoros? It's like only 3 people who live here. And a beautiful beach and volcanoes. Travel. They're like, what are you doing here?
In one of Louis, who's that guy? Schuster. Leon Schuster.
Yes.
I think it was Sweet and Short.
Yes.
So he always, throughout the movie, had a dream of going to the Comores.
Yes.
But things were going wrong. And then he says, I think the line, I paraphrase, I wanted to go to the Comores. Now, I
love it. So now they keep my passport. First, they disagree with me that the hotel I'm going to exists, by the way. I said, of course it exists. Yeah. They're like, where? I said, Comoros is 1 kilometer long.
Yeah.
Whatever. I mean, maybe I'm exaggerating. And I said, we passed the hotel 30 kilometers, just 50 meters, 500 meters from where we are now. They're like, it doesn't exist. So I give them the name. They're like, my friend, this hotel doesn't exist. So now we try to call. So then they call with their phone because mine can't go through. And they said, is this Golden Tulip? They said, no. They said, what is this hotel? They said, Golden Tulip, the name I gave them. They're like, Golden Tulip? Since when? So
they don't know what is happening in their own country.
No, it is us Africans. Remember when you change the name, to us it's always Komaponya.
Yeah.
It's not ShopRite.
Yeah.
That mall, Komaponya.
Yes.
That's how we operate. So he's still holding on to the first name. Now on the way out, so now they keep our passport for the weekend, just to cut us long story short. Then I pick it up on the time I leave on Sunday. They arrive at the airport and then they say, you need to get a visa. I said,
you took it from me.
I said, I'm leaving.
I'm going out.
You need a visa. You can't think of
You see, you're not helping me not to be Afro-pessimistic.
No, but I think it's funny.
It is funny, of course.
I think it's funny. I think it's crazy. Like when I was in, it's in Niger. I think it's in Niger. No, not Niger. it was Chad maybe.
Yes.
When I was in Chad or when I was one of those countries, as I left, they say to me, we see your passport, you didn't pay for the visa to be in the country. I said, I did. When I came in, they're like, no, you're supposed to go to the police station to declare you're in the country. I said, I did. I came through immigration, and immigration stamped my passport. Yeah, they said, no, my friend. You're supposed to now, having entered the country, now to go present yourself and tell them you are in the country. I said, what's the point of the immigration?
I'm not visiting Africa.
But it's fun. I think it's fun because I take
How
all
is
these
that
things.
fun?
I take
I'm
all these
bloody
things in
8,000
jest.
kilometers from home. They speak French. I can't speak French. And then I go through this. I'm going to die. I'm thinking something wrong's going to happen.
Well,
here.
I think maybe a funny last one is as I was eating in Equatorial Guinea. I was eating food, wonderful stew, beautiful. I say to the chef, "What am I eating?" I said, "The stew is amazing. It's like it's stew." I said, "No, it's stew because I'm eating stew le papa yamo." But what is it? What is it? I just want to know.
What is the four-legged animal that is in
That
the
is
stew?
in the stew, yes. It's someone that they say. I remember, my friend, it's stew. So now, I can now you get the look.
Yes.
Let me not fight, but I'm calling my team with being elatelang. Let me just hold back. Then, as we leave the place, then I look on the right hand side. And you want about to bakhala the train mauto, by the besa, they are scalding the monkeys, big red sako Alex. So you want to sako Alex, you wrote the baby zikaton. They're busy scalding them. And so I said to my driver, Pans and Labantu. I did a preparing fresh meat curry.
Now,
but those are
in a funny way, right? You've just made me want to go. Because me, I'll eat any animal. Because who decided the first day that you must eat a cow?
right.
It was necessity, and there was a cow, and you ate. Like, I will eat any protein. I will eat bona. Now, give me meat, I'll eat it.
Right.
It's protein. Right? So maybe I'll go. I mean, I remember the only time I've visited, I haven't even visited for a quarter of what a tenth of what you visited. But the food was always my attraction every time I went into African countries. Except for once, I had food in the DRC day before my coming back. And I've never had a diarrhea long flight like the one I had. But on reflection, actually, the food was nothing wrong, but I think it was how it was prepared. I remember I saw them chopping this goat, so I think that's what happened. It's not that the food was not good.
And sometimes also it's the familiar, your constitution is
not familiar. It's not familiar with the stuff.
But
yes.
I mean, I think it's like somebody who said, if you hate the food, you hate the religion, you hate the culture, it's better to stay home.
True that.
So that's my attitude when I travel. I leave South Africa at the airport, so that when I arrive in the country, I'm able to take in the country authentically, without a filter.
Okay. I gotta get rid of you. One last question. What is right with Africa?
What is right with Africa? This is what is right about this continent. Everybody is coming to us because they know we are entrepreneurial, because they know we are resilient, they know we are creative, and they know we've got the resources. We're just not using them right. We have an incredible continent that is just waiting for us to own it. We need to reclaim our continent. We need to reclaim our creativity, reclaim our economy, reclaim our cultures, reclaim our businesses, reclaim our IP. Once we do all that, you see the magic of this continent. I mean, if you go anywhere else, look at Makosa is now in New York. Look at Thebe Magugu is worn by anybody in the world. Look at our diamonds are on Fifth Avenue, they are on Oxford, they're everywhere else in the world. Look at our talent. You look at Chilizi Marwala, the professor from UJ. Is the first African, the youngest person as the head of the United Nations University in Japan. Not based on being black, based on the fact that he's got a PhD from Cambridge. He's when it comes to 4IR, he is unmatched, and he's just a brilliant mind. That is what is right with us. What is wrong with us is how we don't see the beauty and the value that others see in us, because we are waiting for people to validate us, to tell us we're okay, and only then do we see the value. That is the only thing that's wrong with us, is that we don't see us the way other people see us, which is beautiful.
I want you to look at this camera as you conclude and tell whoever is watching why they should go out and see this continent.
Well, they have to go see this continent. Any African who is alive and breathing has to go see this continent, because there's a good friend of mine, Victor Dlamini, said it so well. He said, everybody has got a past, but Africa has got a future. And who wants to live in the past?
Thebe Ikalafeng, thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure.
I know this podcast has a future. I'm still not sold, but I'm going to hang around you. I'm going to stay around you. And maybe I'll join you in a few visits before I go on my own, because I ain't like it's Havadilo.
No. You must just be, what kind of way are you from? What township are you from?
Soweto, Dobsonville.
You're from Dobsonville.
Yeah. There
are people in this country, Baba Tshabang Soweto.
Yeah.
Dobsonville.
I wonder why. Like, man,
because,
I don't know. Like, really.
So the same attitude you have towards the rest of the continent, somebody's got the same attitude towards Soweto.
Yeah. Until
they get to Soweto. And when they get to Soweto, they said, so I've been depriving myself of this beauty and allowing everybody else to enjoy it.
Okay, thank you very much for watching this episode of Taking the Rams by the Horns. Please like, subscribe, and share. The subscribe button is actually just there on your screen. You will see it. As I believe, toch. In the meantime,
and they must buy my book.
Yes, The Traveler.
The Traveler.
You
know, I should have brought the book. I don't know why I didn't bring the book. You have to buy The Traveler.
Put it on screen though, yeah.
You have to buy the Traveler. If any reason, it's because it's one African story of which showcases the beauty of the continent, the potential of its brands, and the fact that anyone, whether you're like me, you come from a town like Kimball, can be whatever you set your mind to. And then just like an ant, we can make a difference in the world.
And if you have small change after buying that book, then buy this one. The Future is Taboo. That's my book. Mine is fiction. So it's created fictionally, but it could look like Great Africa if I change names. From me, Rams Mavote, goodbye and God bless.
Yeah.